Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my progression and leveling guide for Pyroclast Saboteur on Leaguestart for Trial of the Ancestors. Yes, I've decided on my Leaguestart and I'm going to go with Pyroclast. Now, the reasons are, one, it's just better than everything else I tested. I tested a lot of builds, I had a lot of fun. A lot of them I think are perfectly fine on Leaguestarts. Frostblades was good, RF was chill. I did Stormbind, which I think is strong, especially if you go into Indigon and you want to farm invitations. I did... Oh, what else did I do? I tested even Lacerate Bleed. That was a fun time. I don't think it was OP. I think it was just pretty mediocre. Definitely not competitive compared to the best builds out there. But the point was, I wanted to try out a lot of things, get a feel for League Start with a lot of different builds. And my takeaway was generally, a lot of builds can do League Start decently or okay, but in terms of a competitive, how good is this build, Pyroclast was just the best. It was strong the moment I put it on to all the way up to Eater and Exile. Let me just give you a little showcase yesterday. I did a leveling run where I walked through step by step of how to essentially, that's when I was starting to write this note section on all the key points of gear swaps and stuff. This is me right when I swap to Pyroclast. I swap at level 31. That's what I recommend. That's when you can get charged traps. It's right after you do Sayosa, right after you do the lab. And check out our damage on Dominant. And this is basically what happens for the rest of the campaign. Like if you go back and you can look at the VOD on Twitch if you're curious, but for the rest of the campaign, this is pretty much what it looks like. This is Dominus. And this is how fast Dominus dies on the second we put this skill on. It's just instantly, we're doing good damage on League Start, whatever gear. We crafted Flat Fire from the Act 3 Flat Fire Dispels next to the Diala, and we just cruise. And I was using these two random daggers with these bad crafted flat all the way until about Act 9 or 8, until I randomly just decided, I should probably upgrade this to some decent wand I found on the ground, craft some spell damage on it, get a shield on, and I'll start shield charging around. But all the way up to Act 8, I was just cruising around with Whirling Blades and doing this, and it felt pretty freaking good, in my opinion. And that is all about Pyroclast and how much early damage it has as a skill and as a setup for the build. I like it a lot. Anyways, point is, this is just going to be a leveling guide / progression guide. I'm going to do a separate build guide with a lot more details and stuff, but I figured I'd get this out there for people curious that wanted to test a League Start with this thing if they wanted to do that preparation. I figured I'd make this first because it's going to take me a little bit longer to actually get all the guide information together. So I figured, you know what, let me just bite the bullet, get this out here so people have something to work with if they want to try out the build on a League Start scenario, and that way they have something to work with. And essentially, there's a lot of little steps I have in Acts 1 through 4 that break down the progression. I decided personally I like leveling with Magma Orb, Ele Prolif, and then eventually Combustion support. That being said, you might like something else for leveling. This is not mandatory. This is just a generic suggestion of that's what I like leveling with in terms of getting to Pyroclast. Everything before Pyroclast, if you have another skill you like leveling with more, go ahead and do that. The tree essentially is spec'd out for generic elemental damage, specifically fire going into Snowforge. But this is not specific to mines. It's not specific to traps. It's not specific to even a spell build. Like, you could probably play this with an attack character if it was fire-based, if that's how you like the level, and you have an attack you like that, like, maybe you get Molten Strike. I don't know if you can get Molten Strike. That might be strength requirement. But point is, this is super generic. It's just what I chose as leveling is because I think Magma Orb is good, not necessarily because I think I know for sure it's the best. This is just my own opinion, and if you like something else for leveling, do something else for leveling. But this is just the generic stuff I recommend, going all the way up to Act 3, where we get to run Pyroclast. Essentially, the steps are get to Act 3, run Lab, do Sayosa, and then you'll have these support gems. And if you have a 4-link, you can go for one of these support gems on your 4-link. Initially, when my first 4-link I dropped had a blue, blue, green, red, and I was like, okay, I can go for Fire Pen. If it was a blue, blue, green, green, maybe you go for Hypothermia. I should probably add that in, actually, just so people know in case they get exactly those links. I'll add that in because we do run skitter bots in this character, so you will have the enemy chilled, and so you could go Hypothermia if you get blue, blue, green, green. If you get blue, blue, red, red, I guess you could go Cruelty. Ideally, though, you really want blue, blue, at least a green, and then a red or a blue. Ideal is 3 blue, 1 green, but you can make a lot of combinations work. These are just some generic suggestions. My 4th link I recommend is increase crit strikes just for after which nothing really changes too much besides just pick up gear, idea, and the better gear piece you throw on your character. We have very low socket pressure. For example, if you're just looking at my video I made where I tested this character initially, you're looking at this character, we're using like 10 gems. It's not a very high socket pressure. There are other things you can do to force in other gems for a bit more power. That's absolutely fine. But initially, just for leveling and whatever, this is plenty fine to just stomp through the content. It's going to be okay. I do end up putting in recommendations for gem link things you can go for. For example, we're Eldritch Battery, which Eldritch Battery is pretty free for going for a Divine Blessing, so you could throw in another aura just from Divine Blessing, get some more power there. You could go for a Generosity plus Dread Banner, pairs amazingly with Evasion base because it makes enemies less accurate. Very, very strong. Stuff like that you can fit in. Cast some damage, take an Immortal Call. There's no reason this couldn't work. Stuff like that. You can kind of squeeze in more stuff, but it's not needed. This is more or less just when you get more Jeweler's Orbs, you get more chromes, and you can start chroming your gear and spending time, spending thought process doing that. Sure, you can go for it, but initially, the stuff that's needed for the build to work and work smoothly is basically just 10 gems. It's your Pyroclast setup, it's Whirling Blades or Shield Charge. I think it's Shield Charge with faster attacks. I probably should go get Momentum. Then it's probably Grace, Skitterbots, Frost Blink, and Assassin's Mark, and that's basically all you need. You could also go Sniper's Mark. It depends on how well you're geared. If you're really well geared, you can end up switching to Sniper's Mark. Basically, the way I think about it is if I need crit cap still, then I prefer Assassin's Mark to start getting me to that crit cap. If I'm getting towards crit cap without Assassin's Mark, that's when you swap to Sniper's Mark for the higher damage there. Because I'm not sure about Sniper's Mark and whether or not Pyroclast gets the extra hits. I don't think it does. I think it's a little bit weird in how it works projectile mechanic-wise. Not 100% sure, but that's what I think it works. That's at least how I think it works. Anyways, after you get these gem setups, it should be pretty smooth sailing of just upgrade your gear as you go. I have recommendations like pick up the Jade Flask in Act 5 when you get the Flask reward. Pick up the Quartz Flask when you get the Flask reward, because I recommend initially running 2 Life Flasks, Quartz, Jade, and Quicksilver. That's my initial flask setup that I think works well, because you have Quartz for phasing and the suppress, you have Jade to just pair with your evasion, Quicksilver for moving around, and then 2 Flasks plus Ryslotha is quite good sustain early on when you need it in an emergency or a pinch. I think it's great. Outside of all that, I initially recommend starting with Purity of Elements in Act 3 when your gear's probably trash, your res isn't capped, you don't have a good way to deal with ailments, you don't have the alterations to roll, freeze, remove on your flask per se, or you don't have the Bestiary stuff ready to go for that. I think Purity of Elements is fantastic early on, solves the ailments, makes it super smooth, and then around Act 8, 7 or 8 towards the end, when you get your Cruel Lab done, you're going to pick up the Blind Ascendancy, which pairs amazingly with evasion scaling. At that point, hopefully you found some better gear, and you're actually res capped for this content without Purity of Elements. At that stage, I'd recommend doing the swap to Grace, because you pair that with the evasion of the blind you're getting and the damage reduction and stuff. It starts to pair nicely. You're getting more dex into your build. You can actually fit it attribute-wise. That's when I recommend making the swap. As always, I'd say don't make the swap until your res is on your gear is ready, because if you're not capped for res, the uncapped res is going to kill you before evasion is going to help you survive type of thing. But once you get your res capped for without Purity of Elements, that's when I recommend doing the swap. And then outside of that, it's pretty much just smooth sailing all the way through. Other notes I have here specifically, I have a note on Minefield versus Swift Assembly. My personal opinion is early on, if you equip Minefield at level 38, it's just a lot. It's just too slow. You don't have a bunch of throw speed. You only have the 30 throw speed from your free frenzies at that point. You don't have much spec on the tree. Initially, Minefield has a very big less multiplier to throw speed, and as you get levels on it, that less multiplier becomes not as bad. I personally think swapping Minefield around Act 9 to 10, maybe when you get to campaigns or when you get to mapping, that's when it's worth, because it is a much stronger support in terms of damage, in terms of Mind Throw chains for that bigger DPS. I just think initially you don't really need it damage-wise. Swift Assembly is great while doing the campaign. You do it quick. And then swapping to Minefield when you want to start doing more damage, and when you have a bit better throw speed, you get the other 2 max frenzies on the tree, you have more throw speed, stuff like that. It smooths it out, and it's not as much of a, you're taking an entire second to throw your mines like it is when you initially equip it all the way in Act 4. So, that's my thought process on that. And then I have the basics here, which is about detonation sequencing. Essentially, when you're mapping and stuff, I like having left click. I think it smooths out the playstyle of playing mines as you're mapping, makes it less of a brain. You don't have to think too much about it. But when you get to a boss or an enemy, you have to think about it a little bit, and that's why I have a separate keybind for detonate. And then I'll use mobility skills like Whirling Blades or Shield Charge and Frostblink to move occasionally when I need to without interrupting my detonation sequence. And worst case scenario, if an enemy is swinging at you in an awkward time and you just need to sidestep it, You can do that. You can interrupt the sequence. It's not the end of the world. Usually you're going to do enough damage regardless that it's not going to be a big deal. But a big part of min-maxing DPS has to do with this, and you have to play around it. Now, I will go in game with the character we leveled. It's level 66. This is the character we were testing. We were basically figuring out what gem links, what supports to grab as we level the character. I'll give you a little bit of a look-see what this character looks like, along with how long we took to do the campaign, slash deaths, all that sort of thing. So, for this character, we did the campaign in roughly about 4 hours, 40 minutes. That was our time. I think I can smooth that out. I think I can get that a little bit faster. I was taking my time to try to figure out, make sure I was getting the right gem links and stuff. And now that I have a set plan, it'll be a lot easier to be like, okay, this is the plan. This is what I do. Go, go, go. On top of that, our deaths we died 2 times. Probably once the Roas or something stupid. I don't really know what I died to. I don't remember. Maybe a freeze box right when I did the swap to Grace without getting the flask ready with immune freeze. I can't remember. Point is, that's the current setup. We are just about to enter our first map, so we'll go ahead and do the character map just to showcase what it looks like at this stage of the character. This is all just random gear we picked up from... Which map do I not have? I do not have Scriptorium, so we'll do Scriptorium. We'll do an un-ID'd map. Great thing about Pyroclast is you don't care about Reflect. You can get away with no regen maps because you have Eldritch Battery, all that stuff. Map mods don't matter. That's another great thing about this League starter is you can literally run everything. There are a couple map mods that are more dangerous, like Minus Max. Oh, it's a more dangerous map mod, but that doesn't mean you can't run it. It might be something where if you're playing hardcore, you don't want to run it, right? But there's nothing that says you can't run it, per se. The tankier rare, but still not an issue if we actually, like, try to target him down. But yeah, anyways, this is what it looks like initially when you get to maps. I will, with the build guide, I'm going to give you guys recommendations for pickups on things to buy, upgrades to make. Things like, for example, the Divine Blessing boots. I'm spacing on the name right now, but they give up to 3 to 5 levels to Aura Gems, which applies to Pyroclast. That is what I had in my SSF run I did. And quite frankly, I've done maybe somewhere in the range of, like, I want to say 8 to 10 SSF full runs at this point. I've dropped those boots 4 or 5 of the runs. So they're pretty common. They're not rare boots. I expect them to be very, very early league, maybe 10 to 20 C or something, probably cheaper. I expect them to just tank in price really quickly, even if this build's popular, just because of how common they are. And they're just a great pseudo 5-link early on. Honestly, 5 links are cheap themselves, so you can even just buy yourself a 5-link and it's not going to be a big difference in damage. I like them early just to not think about things. There's also the scenario where you get certain corrupted items that would, He's going over there. Okay, whatever. Alright, certain corrupted items with +2 aura, +2 trap, stuff like that. There's gem level corruptions for Pyroclast that are just not typically valued very much. Plus projectile is okay-ish in value, but there's a lot of things where you probably could find a +4 corruption on some random unique and it probably wouldn't be very expensive and it would work in the character type of thing, and you can keep your eyes out for sniping upgrades like that for the character. But yeah, anyways, I guess we'll go ahead and clear the rest of this map, and then I'll get back to giving you guys a little bit of pick up that. I'm like trying to click up the 6 socket for the longest time, and sometimes it feels like you're like trying to pick stuff up. The pickup range on items just seems, I don't know, maybe I'm just missing my clicks, but it just seems really, really rough. You have to be the absolute very tippity top of the item. Okay, looks like we went around the entire map. I'll go ahead and show you guys the detonation sequence, how it works, maybe explain a little bit of how I was playing there. I didn't do it too well, to be honest with you. I think I messed it up a few times while I was doing the map, but I'll try to explain it as best I can. Anyways, so the detonation sequence, essentially, Pyroclast gets additional projectiles per 2 or 4 previous mines in the sequence. So normally when you detonate Pyroclast, it shoots out 3 projectiles. That's its base. But if you throw a bunch down, you're like, okay, the boss is spawning in, let me put these mines down. And then you say, okay, let's start the detonation sequence. Now, sometimes I have noticed that, and that just did it just now. I started the detonation sequence, but I didn't actually sequence. I don't know if that is a bug or something. I've noticed that happen a few times. I haven't had the issue with minefield, so maybe there's something there. I'm not sure exactly. But anyways, you start the detonation sequence. It starts going through your mines, and it builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up until the last one that you're able to detonate in the sequence is maybe shooting 5, 6, 7 additional projectiles, whatever it is. There's a lot more shotgunning damage all at once, and that's the sequencing I'm talking about in terms of stacking a bunch. And you can do the sequence even better once you get to the minefield support, which I should be swapped into at this point, but I forgot to do it. So it's a bit lower on DPS than we should have at this point because I just didn't get around to swapping my links and getting minefield in there yet. But the idea is normally while mapping, you just chuck, throw, chuck, throw, chuck, throw, and you just keep moving through the map. But when you get to bosses, then you want to do throw down mines, start one detonation sequence. You don't want to keep clicking left click at that point, and then you just want to have them actually chain together to get those like additional projectiles going and going and going, so to speak. The thing is, though, if you have a boss coming at you, he's about to swing at you, you can reposition without clicking left click. Like you can have your mouse over here, click Frost Blink to dodge, and then keep throwing mines, or you can even click Shield Charge to dodge and keep throwing mines. It's something you have to get a little bit used to and get a practice with before I'd recommend like starting the build. Like definitely test Pyroclast mines out, get a feel for it before you commit to anything. That's the idea of League starting Pyroclast per se. All right, hopefully that gives you guys a good look into the idea of League starting Pyroclast. I have made leveling trees specifically following the pathing I took for when I did the test run of leveling this character all the way from level 15 to level, I have 79 and 90 here, which is what I will end up doing if I was going all the way to 90. This is no gem clusters. This is one jewel socket. I'm just assuming that it'll be worth grabbing this jewel socket because it's a one pointer. Even if it's just like you find one jewel with just percent life on it, it's worth grabbing that over like not getting the dex and grabbing the frenzy duration, stuff like that. But that's the idea of the tree. This is just a skeleton for leveling. I'm going to be doing a full guide on this with more information and recommendations for min-maxing, even recommendations to swap this build into hexblast mine, because my ultimate plan is to play Pyroclast, get a bunch of currency doing some Pyroclast, buy hexblast gear, and swap into hexblast, because I think hexblast feels amazing. It's probably my favorite mine-based character of all time I've played, and I think it's really good at Sanctum, and I want to farm Sanctum. So that is the Leaguestart leveling guide for Pyroclast Sabo. If you're interested in it, hopefully this gives you a breakdown of how to do it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and enjoy. Peace out.